So you wanna be a picture book writer, then you gotta write picture books. And you're gonna need a bucket load of bright ideas for titles, plots, and hooks. If you're partial to prose or you're raring to rhyme, then repeat after me. It's a challenge, but I'm gonna tackle each story 1 month at a time with 12 by 12.
These books, and there are many more, but these 3 books are just representative titles of texts that have been really influential on me and my style. And they just happen to stand out in my memory for particular reasons. The first book, I don't know if anyone is familiar with this book. It's been around, it's kind of an older title, Being With You This Way. And it actually is my oldest daughter's favorite childhood book. And I didn't recognize until about maybe 3 years or so ago, I didn't remember until then how influential this book was on me. I loved reading this book. It has the tone of like one of those older playground rhymes or maybe early hip hop, form. It was very simple. It just has that good flow to it. And I enjoyed performing that book for my kids because, we didn't just read, we performed the books. And just like I said, like about 3 years ago, I recognized how impactful that book has been on my writing style. It's very musical, and I find myself drawn to books that have that particularly strong level of musicality. So that's one thing that really characterizes, I think, my books. And then there's authenticity. Kevin Henkes Mouse books. I think he is a masterful writer. We have so many of them. This book, Chrysanthemum, was one that I couldn't get enough of reading. My kids couldn't get enough of listening to, but really, truly, I could say that about all his Mouse books. But the thing I love about these books is that Kevin Henkes knows children. And his portrait, even though he's writing mouse children, he really, you can tell he knows them, he respects them by his depictions of them on the page. They're so authentic, emotionally, behaviorally, and he doesn't talk down to children. He's always got some big vocabulary words thrown in, and I found myself doing that too. I love a good vocabulary word. So the authenticity of books like Kevin Henkes Mouse books and Chrysanthemum and When Really Worried and all those, that's something that I find myself drawn to, and I try to incorporate in my work as well. And then the final book represented on the screen is one by Jacqueline Woodson, and the word under hers is emotion. And we know why. If you've ever read a Jacqueline Woodson book, you know how emotionally rich they are. And this particular book, I don't think it's still in print, but it's called Our Gracie Aunt. And when my youngest daughter was, I guess, about 5 years old, we checked it out from the library. And then later on, sometimes later, we checked it out again. This book was kind of like a window book for her. So sincerely and gently told. And it's about a brother and a sister who go to stay with their aunt because their mother is no longer able to take care of them. And she had so many questions about that book, and it generated such wonderful conversation between us. And so, I thought to myself, if I were to ever, move beyond writing the joyful books that I started out kind of writing, that's what I would want to do. I would want to be able to write a book that generated that kind of, that had that kind of emotional impact on kids. So musicality, authenticity, emotion, these are traits that I try to incorporate in all of my books, but some to varying degrees, depending on what it is that I'm writing about. For example, this is my very first book that I had published, and it's called Around Our Way on Neighbor's Day. And it is about a young girl and her multicultural community, close-knit community, and she's taking us on a tour of the neighborhood as they're celebrating or preparing to celebrate Neighbor's Day. And the thing about this book, and this is what I recognize, how much I think subconsciously books like being with you this way had on my writing of this book and the style. It literally is structured as a song. It's got a refrain, two verses, a refrain, two verses, and a refrain. And I carry that structure all the way out. And so the musicality was what I really focused on in this book as I was crafting it. Now, for these next few slides, I've got a word on the left and a word on the right. The word on the left, is going to indicate which of those three traits, musicality, authenticity, or emotion, that I really focused on most when writing a particular book. But the words on the right represent other things that I was thinking about or that it had an influence on my crafting of the book, my experiences, my philosophy, etc. So for this one, I think Montessori had a really strong impact on it. When I was writing it, Montessori mom, involved in the environment every day. And one of the things about Montessori is that there is an emphasis on global citizenship, which I really loved. And I think that being immersed in that environment at the time, that had an influence on this particular story. Also, the fact that I'm from Miami, Florida, and that is so rich in culture and diversity. And so kind of just bringing myself to my work, that influenced it as well. For my sophomore effort, my Cold Plum Lemon Pie Bluesy Mood, which was originally titled In a Mood, because one day I was just having one of those days where everything was like bothering me. And I just had to stop myself and say, okay, Tameka, it's not everybody else. It's you. You're in a mood. And then you know how we are as writers. It can be a turn of phrase. And In a Mood just struck me. And I was like, okay, this is something I need to start, I need to sit down and write a story around this. And so I did. And so, of course, it's about moods. So the emotional part of my craft focus, that's really what I was strongly focusing on here. Of course, musicality, it's written as a free verse, kind of spoken word. All of the other things were at play, but at the fore, of course, I was mostly focused on making sure that I was on point with the emotion. Another thing that I wanted to do with this book is to ensure that not only do kids understand that all of our emotions are good, the happy ones and the not so happy ones, because they're ours and they are true to whatever it is that we're feeling, and that's important. And the expression of those emotions, the good, the happy ones and the not so happy ones, is important. And so all of that, my philosophy on kids embracing their emotions and knowing that it's okay to express them, that impacted the ways that I crafted that particular story. Brown Baby Lullaby started out as it's a hardcover book, and it's a board book as well. But this particular book is a lullaby. So of course it's going to be musical. And as I was penning this, of course, it's a book of affirmation. It's inspired by my nostalgic memories of my own kids when they were babies. The older they get, the more nostalgic we get and think about those baby days. And so, so that was the inspiration for that. When I knew that I was going to take those memories and craft a story that was a lullaby, I had to be really focused on making sure that the musicality was there. In fact, this is my most tightly metered rhyming book. And it was very important for me to make sure that I did that, because that's what a lullaby is to me. So musicality was important. And then writing a book of affirmation that would show children that they are loved and lovable and valuable and valued and all those things, was important for me to do as well. This book, even though I'm kind of interrupting the timeline a little bit, it's my book that's coming out in November, but literally it is designed to be a follow-up to Brown Baby Lullaby, both of them published by FSG. And so there's the musicality in this one as well. It's not as tightly rhymed. It's a rhyming book, but it's a little bit more jazzy, syncopated, if you will. And but it's also a book of affirmation because, like I said, again, it's the follow-up, but just for older children and telling them, not only how great they are, but how great they can be. So, and then 12 Dinging Doorbells, the book, one of the books that Julie mentioned. I got the idea. I don't know if anybody in the audience is familiar with the hashtag Thanksgiving with Black families, but that was the literal inspiration for this particular book. That hashtag it's not kid friendly all the time, but it is something that really kind of brings people, no matter what aspect of the Black community that you exist in, where you're from. There are certain things that just kind of tend to happen at all of our family gatherings, and I wanted to kind of write an ode to that in a humorous way. So that's what I wanted to focus on. That's where you see authenticity reflected on the left side. And of course, the musicality was automatically going to be there once I decided that I wanted to write this story patterned after the 12 Days of Christmas. So I think I was equally focused on making sure I got just all of the language right, from the musicality aspect and then the authenticity, so that kids, familiar with large Black family gatherings would like feel, yes, I relate to this. And other kids who aren't familiar would be able to say, okay, yeah, you know what? This reminds me of my family in this way, but instead of sweet potato pie, we eat this, or instead of, line dancing or spades, we tend to play this. So in that way, it's universal and specific at the same time. And of course, in all that I just described, family and love were the things that drove me and motivated me and how I crafted this particular story as well. And here we get to my very first nonfiction picture book, which took me over 2 years to even figure out how to write, because I was so convinced that nonfiction was not my lane. The idea, somebody presented this idea to me to write, and I just kind of had it on the back burner because I just didn't think that I could. And it was difficult to figure out how to write it. But once I thought about the fact that I could bring myself and my strengths to the story, and for me, that was writing lyrically, writing in poetry. Once I decided to write it as a free verse poem, then the ideas flowed and I was able to craft the story. So lyricism, musicality was my entry into being able to write this story. And as I wrote it, one of the things that I wanted to leave kids with was the idea of leadership and how it's important to incorporate leadership in our day-to-day lives. Yes, you can be a change maker in society at large, but you can also be a change maker in your small sphere of influence, in your classroom, in your family, with your friend group, by being willing to speak up and out for the things that are right and just and in service to other people. And so leadership, using your voice, is one of the things that drove me and how I structured Not Done Yet. And finally, That Flag, which again is a book about best friends divided over their understanding about what the Confederate flag really means. And I first wrote this book back in 2015 following the Charleston church shootings. And side note, at the time, nobody was willing to buy it. Fast forward to 2020, it went to auction. Largely the same story, like 99%. We always tweak a little bit. But this particular story, it came from such a personal place because after the Charleston church shooting, massacre really, the investigation showed the murderer on social media brandishing the Confederate flag in multiple pictures. And then that recycled debate came up as to whether or not the Confederate flag was an emblem of hate, or whether it was just a symbol of Southern heritage and Southern pride that some people just misused. And so I really thought it was time to set the record straight, particularly for our children, but for everybody who would dare pick up the book to read it, as to really what the historical origins of the Confederate flag was, and how, more importantly, how it impacts, or as importantly, I should say, how it impacts those of us who feel terrorized when we see its public veneration. And I wanted to write this from an emotion. I think I could have written authenticity, emotion. I should have written both of them on the left side, because I really wanted to authentically express how it makes us feel. And I also was hoping to have an emotional impact on the reader at the same time. I think it's been described as being a gentle story. And I wanted to do that as well, because I think sometimes we can communicate to either convict or convince. And in this case, I'm hoping to convince someone to see it from a different perspective if they need to. So that, and then truth, of course, like I said, I wanted to really tell the truth to kids in a way that they could understand and embrace. And that was my goal and how I crafted that story.
Do it together, so never you fear. It's a handy little way to help you kick into gear. You're amazing, exciting. Look out, 'cause you're writing 12 by 12.
12 manuscripts.
12 by 12.
12 picture books.
12 by 12 this year.